Hello, everyone's Forest Focus. Yesterday, perhaps we all got a little bit of ahead of ourselves and looked like the future of the City Ground was resolved and Nottingham Forest would be staying put. Now the clouds of uncertainty seem to be hanging over the situation a little again, with the City Council, Rushcliffe Borough Council and the club themselves all issuing statements in the last 24 hours. We'll discuss that situation in full and the excellent news that Forest women are going full-time from the 25-26 season in the company of, first of all, Pete Blackburn. Pete, good to have you with us. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay, thanks, Matt. Nursing a potentially broken finger from football last night and an even more broken head from the last 24 hours of all things City Ground, but okay otherwise. And nice to be here now that you've finished your chat about your investment portfolio.
It was hardly a portfolio, but there you go. Did you save the shot that broke your hand or not? Broke your finger?
I did, yeah, but not with great technique, hence the potentially mangled finger.
I've all been there, don't worry. Painful business. Second guest is Reds fan Paul Morley. Paul, how are you doing?
Good, thank you, Matt. Yes, good to talk Forest again and take my mind off the drudgery that has been the Euros for the last few weeks, which has been a bit turgid to watch, hasn't it? Even though we're doing well. So yeah, good to chat.
Yes, we'll get into that. Really quickly from each of you, is this the worst tournament you can remember, or actually are they all a bit grim in various phases, Paul?
I guess it's sort of it's funny, isn't it? I was looking at some stats the other day because you get these sort of on this day, however many years ago, and I was 11 when Italia 90 was on, and that to me at the time was sort of like the best tournament ever. But actually, if you look at the stats and some of the goals per game in that tournament was awful, and this has been felt a bit like that. So I think if I've got an 11-year-old son who's really into it, and he's really excited that England are in the semis, and he'll probably look back on it in when he grows up as being a great tournament if we go all the way. But yeah, the excitement of the games has been, I think, was it the Austria-Netherlands, it was 3-2 a few weeks ago. That was a pretty good game, but apart from that, I can't really remember any ones that have sort of had me on the edge of the seat, obviously apart from England, but for sort of the wrong reasons. But yeah, it's not been great watching, has it? But hopefully the next few days will be better, and yeah, at the end of the day, if we end up winning the tournament 1-0 on with an own goal or whatever, we're sure we'll be happy enough.
Yeah, Georgia and Albania have been a little ray of sunshine in it.
Mm-hmm.
Pete, Paul's right, Pete. I think you're a bit younger than me. Italia 90 was my tournament, and actually it was pretty rubbish until England played Belgium or Cameroon or whoever it was that got them going. Is Euro 2024 that bad for you or not?
No, I think you guys are probably right. I suspect it's generally the case that tournament football isn't wildly entertaining, and there's a reason why we remember some of those moments, like that incredible Argentina team goal from, was it 2006? The remarkable team goal anyway, because they're sort of standout moments, I suppose. And I guess, as Paul says, I think we'll probably just, if things go well in this tournament, we'll end up looking back on it and remembering those moments like the Bellingham overhead kick and that incredible Saka goal the other night, and romanticising all that stuff. I suppose that's just how we work.
Let's get into Forest then. Good to have 137 people with us already. Well, yesterday then, the City Council put out a statement saying there was a deal agreed in principle, I think was the phrase. I've got it noted down here for what was actually happening. Agreed in principle the sale of the City Ground to Nottingham Forest, subject to board approval next Tuesday. That was from the City Council. Forest issued a statement later that day saying, for absolute clarity, we continue to work on the terms of a conditional deal for the purchase of the freehold. Any decision to purchase the freehold will be entirely conditional on Nottingham Forest first being granted the relevant permissions that will allow us to realise our hugely ambitious plans for a significantly larger stadium capacity, world-class hospitality spaces, and associated substantial real estate development in the vicinity of the ground. And then this morning, the leader of Rushcliffe Borough Council, Councillor Neil Clark, said, we'll continue to work constructively with all partners. It's positive for Nottingham Forest and the City Council, are continuing discussions, and like all commercial negotiations, details remain confidential. We granted Forest Planning permission for their latest application to extend the capacity and associated rentals in 2022. Should further plans come forward, these will go through our usual independent planning processes. So, Pete, you were at the council meeting yesterday. You've done lots of digging around. It sort of sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, like there's some kind of deal in place to buy the freehold. Forests are a bit like, well, hang on a minute, nothing's agreed, and also we're not going to sign anything until we get planning permission because it's going to cost us a ton of money. And Rushcliffe are like, well, if you want to change the plans and go even bigger, then we have to go through the planning process all over again. It feels a bit messy, and perhaps we got a bit of ahead of ourselves. Am I right? What's your understanding from all the work you've done in the last 24 hours or so on this?
Well, I think the short answer is I'm not really sure, and I guess that's often the answer that we come to. The more you speak to people, the less clear things become. So I guess for anyone who missed yesterday's news, this was a council meeting that took place at the council house in Old Market Square yesterday. There were a sort of fairly big feeling of relief, I think, and applause breaking out when the council leader announced the situation. And it seemed like major progress at the time because I had heard, and I think some people had heard around the middle of last week, that major progress had been made. The sale of the freehold had been agreed. The intimation was that this was more or less a done deal. So the leader of the council statement seemed to fit quite well, really. I mean, it was even intimated to me that it wouldn't be unreasonable to suggest that developments to the Peter Taylor stand would begin next year. So it felt like things were moving on very quickly. But as you say, there have been statements since that seem to muddy the situation somewhat. Look, I think that there's a wide sort of scope of possible outcomes here and possible next steps. I think that what we could be seeing is anything from a pretty benign issue where perhaps communication hasn't been great between parties. Things have happened a bit more quickly on one side than the other, and that has not been bottomed out well. And there's a resulting bit of sort of dissatisfaction with that process. It may be that that's all that's going on here, but it also may be that there are bigger questions looming. It's all speculation at this point, but as you say, the statement from Forest makes it sound like they could be looking for bigger plans. If that's the case, then that would be the beginning of another very lengthy process. Forest have had planning application in place and approved since, I think, 2022 for the works on the Peter Taylor stand. But if there's more to be done there, we know from history that it's a very, very complicated and very difficult process, and there's an awful lot of parties around the city ground. There's an awful lot of restrictions. So that would be a blow, I think. And it may bring another question about whether Totem's back on the table. So yeah, the short answer is I don't think we really know where we are at the moment, and the coming days will be key. I think it's the hope is that at the executive board meeting next Tuesday, the council's executive board meeting, they will be approving essentially the disposal of this land and the sale to Forest. The agenda for that meeting is public now, so people can go and have a look at it. It says in there that part of the things that the council are being asked to approve is that the details will not come back to the council again. Therefore, there's not going to be any further wrangling over fees and such like that are suggested, and that would intimate that you're a long way down the line. So we don't really know. Privately, I've had lots of conversations. There have been concerns raised about whether the council has gone a little bit too quickly here, and that things look a little bit amateurish there. Whether that's the case or not, I don't think we really know. There are also other concerns about whether this deal as it is a good one for the taxpayer, with it being an immediate capital receipt but a loss of a long-term revenue one. So there's so much going on here. But ultimately, I think we all want this to be resolved, and most of us, I think, hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn, I think most of us want it to be resolved with a future at the City Ground. So I'm still hopeful that yesterday's events and the events of the last few days and recent weeks are leading us towards that solution, but clearly the water's been muddied a little bit.
Excellent. Good work, Pete. Very thorough. I appreciate that. You've heard all that, Paul. You probably formed your own opinions going into this. You probably read the statements as well. How do you feel about it all in general? And then we'll branch off with some other questions as normal.
Yeah, I guess compared to where we were 6-8 weeks ago. It feels like things are moving in the right direction. So I think we definitely feel, it's positive progress. I think it was Alan mentioned in the comments there that, is the club now using effectively the same sort of public bargaining tactic that it did with the City Council, and now transferring that sort of pressure over to Rushcliffe, as if to say, right, over to you guys. We've agreed, all the councils is it a concerted effort between both the council and the club to do the same? I'm not so sure about that, but it does feel like it's now on Rushcliffe, doesn't it? And I think another comment there, I think was James just mentioned that obviously the planning permission that was granted in 2022 obviously was when we were in the Championship, and we would have had designs on getting promoted, but probably didn't necessarily really have a sense of what that sort of demand for tickets would be before that actually happened. And I watched the video last night. I went back on YouTube, and the video that Forest released, I think at the time that they sort of either submit the plans or had them agreed. I can't remember exactly what point it was. And it references on there 38,000 capacity, I think, on that video in the graphics, which, given the recent sort of conversations that seem to have been having had, feels like we're talking 40 plus now. Obviously there's talk about 50,000 at Toten. So perhaps the club have realised actually maybe we could get a bit more, and we do need more space than we maybe previously thought. Whether that results in back to square one for a whole new planning permission, or whether, I know a lot of people have talked about, let's just get the Peter Taylor stand done first, and then we can maybe look at another tier on the Brian Clough or whatever it may be, and do it gradually. I think that for me would be a sensible way to go if that ultimately what ends up happening. I hope that is what we do. And as you say, Pete, things can get cracking relatively quickly on the Peter Taylor stand, and then the flip side, obviously, trying to plan for a even bigger stadium is, whilst again things on the pitch seem to be moving in the right direction, you're going to be guaranteed your Premier League status for the next 3 or 4 years. So if the Peter Taylor stand does get done in the next couple of years, and that gets up to 36, 37, 38, whatever that is, as long as we're still competitive in the Premier League, then we can look at the next stage. I think it'd be a bit, maybe not foolish, but a bit hasty to sort of think too far beyond that, given that we've only just had a couple of relatively close calls in staying in the Premier League for the last couple of years. We need to make sure we are fully established, I think, in the next 3, 4, 5 years before we start thinking 40k plus, and hopefully that stability for the next few years would give us that sort of basis on which to then push on further. So that's my thoughts. I hope it all gets sorted. I mean, I'm not saying anything that's not really been said before, but it feels just like, maybe the club's using the same sort of tactics with this latest statement by transferring the pressure to Rushcliffe that it did originally with the City to obviously get to this advanced point that we seem to find ourselves now compared to 6-8 weeks ago.
Just on Rushcliffe, Pete, just for clarity, and respond to Paul as well there if you want, but people watching this might not appreciate the City Council don't give out the planning permission. It's in Rushcliffe's borough, so it's their jurisdiction to resolve the planning situation. So the City Council owns the land, Forest are buying the freehold, but Rushcliffe give the planning permission to develop the land, which people might not appreciate, which adds further complications and why it's taken so long.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So a couple of years ago, the planning application that we're discussing went through Rushcliffe Borough Council's planning committees and council committees. That, as I recall, it was to double the capacity of the Peter Taylor stand, I think, to 10,000 capacity, and with some various other works around that, including hospitality, commercial. I think there's a big conference facility, and various associated bits and bobs. So that process has already happened for the original plans. As Paul said, those are obviously quite old plans, and as I intimated, this is an incredibly long, slow process as it plays out, planning, and particularly in this case because it's just such a complicated development on such a small site with so much going on around it, whether it's the river or the houses or other businesses, the Environment Agency. There's all sorts going on there. I say the one confusion is we've talked in the comments, and Paul's mentioned about whether this is a sort of move to put pressure on Rushcliffe Borough Council. I mean, Rushcliffe Borough Council clearly stated that they haven't received any planning applications for new developments since this. So as it stands, the planning's all in place. The Section 106 agreements have all been done. The council's going to, the football club's going to contribute an awful lot of money to local bus services, all infrastructure, all that sort of stuff. That's all done. Big, difficult stuff. That's all done. If it is the case that the club want to do different work or more work, then it seems slightly odd to me that they wouldn't have put that in train already. And the Rushcliffe Borough Council are clearly saying that they haven't. What's sort of even more odd is that from the sort of private messaging I've been privy to, the club have been sort of consistent that the only issue as they see it is the leasehold and the freehold. So this issue of potentially wider planning such like hasn't cropped up in any discussions I've had. So that's a bit of a surprise, which is why I think there's a bit of uncertainty about where we are. But as I said at the start, I'm sort of still hopeful that actually there's not a great deal going on here, besides sort of a little bit of miscommunication or errors of messaging and such like. But it's at this point we just don't know the answer to that. Yeah,
I guess part of it is the club saying we're not going to spend 10 million quid on a freehold unless we know what we're getting. But they have to submit the planning application for that, as you say, to get it down the line. So that's why I feel like it's a bit of a Reservoir Dogs circular firing squad type thing at the moment that hopefully gets resolved. That's kind of how I see it anyway. Did you want to come back in there, Pete?
I was just going to say, I mean, that's totally true. And I mean, I have no issue with the club wanting assurances of that sort of thing. I think the sort of slightly confusing part of that is that it's pretty clear that the club have been making these negotiations over the sale of the lease, the extension of the leasehold, or the sale of the freehold separately to all of this. So I don't really understand how the argument actually holds.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I think that's fair, and we'll see how it develops. One of the other points we've made, Paul, and you made it as well, as around the comms of it all. I haven't spoken to anyone at Forest, but I don't imagine they were thrilled seeing huge swathes of quotes in the Athletic today. Sort of celebrating from the city council leader. Obviously, politically, it's a victory for her if this goes through. So I don't know if Forest were thrilled or not with that. I suspect they weren't. When, from a fan point of view, from the next phase of this, does it feel like the next statement probably has to be a joint one, and they need to kind of resolve this back and forth, which they did do for a few weeks after a lot of interviews that both sides did? Does it feel like the next step needs to be actually this is confirmation, contracts are signed, T's are crossed and I's are dotted?
Yeah, joint statement would be nice, wouldn't it? I think that's probably what we all want, is some cohesion in this process. I thought when I saw the council statement, I thought, that's good. I expected to see something pretty quickly following up from the club, but obviously it took a few hours. And as we know, it was a little bit not contradictory, but a bit of a put the handbrake on sort of statement, wasn't it? So, yeah, look, I'm not obviously privy as close as Pete has been to this process with attending the council meetings. Your Pete will have a good steer on what the feeling is as to how close the club and the council are really working together. But yeah, just purely from a fan's point of view, you want cohesion, you want collaboration, and you want togetherness in this project. Hopefully, we'll get that in the next few days, or basically following that meeting. I think, Pete, that you said is taking place next week to sort of rubber stamp the agreement to sell the land. So yeah, fingers crossed we get a bit more cohesion going forward.
Are you still patient on it all, Paul? As I saw a few people on Twitter saying they're getting a bit weary of it now. A few people who were in favour of ground moves, saying, why don't we just push ahead with that, whether it's Toton or elsewhere? Are you still happy to bide your time and wait, or would you consider thinking, actually, maybe it's just better we move grounds, even if it's not?
No, I'm pretty relaxed about it. I think in terms of it taking time, I think as long as you get the right outcome, then it's worth waiting the time. I think, obviously, if we were going to go down the route of Toton or anywhere else, that's going to be that's not going to happen overnight. I think, as many people have said, that's a long way away. So whatever happens, I think we know that the City Ground is home for the next few years. But yeah, for me, I don't think there's any rush in upsetting the apple cart by throwing Toton back into the mix again or anything else. And it sounds like the club is committed to going down this route, which is a good thing, as I say, compared to perhaps what we were feeling 7-8 weeks ago. We weren't so sure about that, but it seems as though that's at least where the club wants to be. So as long as that's the desire from within the club is to stay there, then I'm quite happy that it takes as long as it takes to get to that right outcome.
Just lastly on this, then, Pete, putting your fan hat back on, sort of the same question to you: Are you happy to sit on this, even if it takes another 2 years or something before we finally get it all resolved? I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but are you relaxed about the situation still?
I'm very relaxed about the situation if the spectre of a move to Toten isn't looming. It feels at the moment that we've moved away from that, which is reassuring. I mean, just on that, there is a sort of a number of people who will say that was never a real prospect. It was all politics, that this sort of ending was always going to happen. And my understanding is that that's very much not true. I mean, on top of sort of media reports and interviews, there have been private briefings, communications with representative groups and all sorts of people where I'm aware that it's been made clear that this was very much a live option. Indeed, I think some people have heard that this is the only realistic option at times in the past. And as I said on Twitter yesterday, some people may have seen there were some significant voices against that move, both publicly and privately. And I think we should be very grateful to the people who've put their heads above the parapet in both senses and made those feelings clear, because I think they do represent most of us. But yeah, so the wider question, I'm relaxed about it, and I think it's only fair for me to be, because I'm such an advocate of staying at the City Ground. I think we have to be understanding that it is complicated, and that the people in charge at Forest have lots of issues that they need to address. They need to think about finance. They need to think about all sorts of things aside from just romance and the things that I worry about as a fan. It's not easy, but if they're committed to staying at the City Ground, then I'm absolutely committed to being patient with them in that process. I think all we ask, or all I ask, I don't speak for anybody else, is that communications generally with all parties involved, and I think both sides have been guilty of mistakes on this front, are clear and transparent and fair now, moving forwards, because clearly this has been murky for a number of weeks and months and however long, and I'm not convinced it's particularly fair on those of us who care about this as much as we do. So moving forward, that's what I'd like to see. But as I say, for me, absolutely happy to be patient. If the motivation is to be at the City Ground and to make that place the best it can possibly be, that's all that I want as a Forest fan. That's my number one priority. And I'm very happy to hear that there is, moves towards that. And I will applaud any efforts to make that happen, by the club or by other parties in the long term.
Some drilling going on next door, which is quite annoying. I think my mic will stop any noise coming through, but sorry if it does. Are you bothered by Toten being a live option in theory, Paul? Mikey said yesterday, who's a big advocate of staying as well, that if the club explore other options that they think is best, then that's prudent, I guess. So do you mind them exploring Toten if they ultimately end up staying here? It doesn't matter really, does it?
No, I think it is prudent. I think, because until the sort of ink is dry on the deal that's agreed, then the club need to be making sure that there are options elsewhere. If hopefully we don't get to that stage, but if this does sort of all go pear shaped, then options are needed. And as we've seen, as we've alluded to, the sort of option of Toten or wherever else being on the table does seem to have helped move things forward and get to this point. So I don't have a problem with it being on the table as I say, very much as a backup option, I would think. But I think it's just prudent and sensible. Like any business, you've got to have a contingency plan for whatever field you're in if plan A doesn't come to fruition. So no problem with that for me.
Right, 24 minutes on the City Ground, so we covered that thoroughly. And just before we move on, a quick word for Trent Navfest, of course, on Saturday, the 13th of July. So a month away, 2 p.m. till late. It's organised by the Tryst, largely, who are one of the bands listed, raising funds for charity as well. So if you're looking for something to do on July the 13th, I say a month away, a week away, sorry. A week away, not a month away. Search Navfest on gigantic.com to get your tickets for that one at the Nav, who are putting on a series of wonderful events this summer, including obviously the England games it's out of their hands how wonderful they are to an extent. But I know people like Pete are having a good time and getting hangovers down there in the process. So do support the Trent Nav, who support us so well. Right, the other news coming out today was around the women's team. It's been announced they're going to go full-time from the 25-26 season as they chase a place in the WSL ultimately, which would mean getting 2 promotions. And also importantly, they're going to play 11 games at the City Ground, which I think would be all their home league games, basically. I guess, Pete, starting with you, I can't like commend the club enough for doing it. It feels like such a really positive step. It's not going to like break the bank doing it, because women's football requires a smaller investment, but it is still a big investment financially, and it's a big investment in people. So I think it's really good. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I should just caveat my answer by saying I'm no expert in women's football matters. So, if I'm wrong about anything, then, I'm sorry about that. I do have a sort of slightly extra sentimental link with Nottingham Forest women, or Forest ladies as they used to be known, because when I was a journalism student, I spent part of a year covering their matches and doing reports and all that sort of stuff. And back then it was a much smaller organisation, I think, but with some brilliant people, and it was great to be a very, very tiny little part of that. But yeah, I mean, I totally echo what you said. I mean, for me, this just seems like incredibly positive news. I mean, one of the things that I bang on about constantly is this football club being the heart of the community, and that means for everyone. So for me, this is just fantastic to see. It feels like a real statement of intent, a bit of a blueprint about how development is going to play out over coming months and hopefully over many years. And let's just hope this can be the first, and well, not the first step. There's been huge amounts of work done already, but another step towards Forest women realizing sort of all the potential that they have as part of our club. So I'm absolutely delighted about it, to be honest. And also, if you don't mind me adding, I've been following developments with the new Forest netball team with interest, as someone who follows a bit of England netball and such like, and also equally excited by that and the recent announcement of Chelsea Bittman as head coach, which strikes me as an incredibly exciting and ambitious move, getting someone who has only recently retired from an absolutely stellar career as an England international. So exciting times, really, and it's lovely to be able to talk about these things and the club making steps to really sort of represent the community and embed itself in the community as strongly as possible. I think we have some followers of this podcast who are sort of avid followers or involved in the Forest women's side as well. So I'm sure they're delighted, and yeah, I'm absolutely buzzing about it.
Yeah, I see Oliver's in the comments, who's a big follower of the women's team, and he's delighted, obviously, with it. The other thing, Paul, was investment in the girls' academy. I think you're involved in youth sport, in that your kids play cricket, and you're down there as a dad, taxi, and umpire, and all that stuff. And I do place, kind of a lot of stock in kids playing sport for physical activity, team sports as well, for all that stuff. So. I've got a daughter. I want her to have the same opportunities as boys. So, I think the whole thing's just really good in general. What are your thoughts on that, as someone who's involved in youth sport and just the general promotion of the women's team?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, echo everything that Pete said in terms of, it's great news. I think in terms of youth sport, funnily enough, in terms of going away from my kids, but my cousin's daughter is... just because last year she's done her first year as a WSL referee, so she's on the elite panel for the WSL. Last year was her first year, and she's actually grew up in Derby, but her mum was telling me that all the way throughout her sort of progression through the system, that actually the Derbyshire FA were pretty rubbish, and it was the Notts FA and Forest, and she used to come in and do a lot of stuff with Forest women, or Forest ladies as it was then, to get her to where she was. So that's, I guess, this news sort of reinforces that actually this has probably been a relatively sort of long-term plan to elevate the ladies' side of or the women's side of the club. So yeah, I think it's great news, and as you say, anything that engages more kids in the community to get involved in sport. You would hope that the long-term plan is to get Forest women into the WSL, and I think it said they're going to play 11 games at the City Ground next season, I think. So again, that will expand the ability for more kids, more girls and boys to go and watch women's football, which, compared to, if I think back to when I was a kid, there was it wasn't a thing. So go back a couple of years when England won the Euros. I remember, my kids, we'd funnily enough just finished a cricket match. We went round a friend's house, and there was 2 families with 5 boys all watching it and cheering on England women, which was a great thing to be a part of. So yeah, all power to the club for making that move, and it'd be really interesting to see how the women's team progresses, and hopefully, as I say, gets itself into the WSL in the next couple of years and gets even more exposure.
Yeah, hopefully so. So it's from the 25-26 season. So one more season as they're sort of a hybrid model already. So they're on the road. They made big strides already. It's really hard to get promoted from the league they're in. So hopefully that happens this season. But fair play to everyone involved, and fully commend what the ownership have done with this in general. Just lastly, before we go, it's not been announced yet, but Carlos Miguel had his medical yesterday. I'm sure his agent was at the club, at the training ground, and his representative as well. Pete, are you already penciling him as your number 1 for next season, or are you more circumspect and you're a Matt Sells man until we see Miguel play?
No, I'm not penciling him in. I'm not nothing tribal about it between the keepers or anything. But I think I said on a previous podcast, it seems like a positive bit of recruitment for us, and the recruitment team working in South America definitely deserve the trust with what they've done so far. But as I see it, Miguel comes here, if that's all signed and sealed, in a really nice situation where we've got a goalkeeper who already feels like an improvement on what we've had. He feels stable and steady, and it looks like there's decent trust between him and the defence and the rest of the team. It doesn't look like an issue when you're at games, and obviously that's a sort of nice feeling given where we've been in the recent past. So for me, he comes here with the opportunity to break into the team if he's if he can adapt quickly and shows that level of ability in training and settles and all that sort of stuff. But also he's got the option of time, which is, I think, so important. And we often just talk about players sort of succeeding or failing in relatively binary terms, but footballers need time and space to develop and to settle into new lives and to adapt to new circumstances and all that sort of stuff. And this is a guy who's not played an awful lot of football in his career, who's coming from a very different culture and environment and to very different football. So as I see it, it's only positive that he's got time and space to settle in and to develop and potentially challenge in the longer term, or indeed all goes brilliantly and he can challenge in the short term. Either way, I'm very happy with whoever is deemed to be the best goalkeeper at the club, and if he's deemed to be a better goalkeeper than Matt Sells, then I think we've got a good one at a very, very good price. So for me, it's sort of win-win all round.
Just before we hear from Paul on that and the squad in general, because he's not been on for, a while, a word for our second sponsors, our friends at Heavy Metal Football. They have got a restock going on from their. Hang on, I'm just finding my notes. There's so many notes in the thing today with all these statements from the football clubs and the councils. So start again. Heavy Metal Football have launched a pre-order for the restock of the 1993-1995 away-inspired T-shirt. Pre-orders are open until Monday to 21st of July, so make sure you guarantee your shirt by pre-ordering now. And then I shall add this second graphic of our friend Ruby Nade modelling the shirts that are on offer. They also have a range of other alternative Forest inspired shirts available at their website, which is heavymetalfootball.co.uk. I'll put the link in the episode description as well. heavymetalfootball.co.uk. You can get 20% off your order with the code FORESTFOCUS, or one word in caps here, but I don't know if it actually has to be or not. Right, smoothly done as ever. Paul, you've not been on for I think it's about a month since you've been on. We've done a lot of business since then. So give us your thoughts on where we're at in terms of Anderson coming in, Mangala, Niakate, everyone going out, potentially going to sign O'Brien or someone else that might come from Leon, all that kind of stuff. Are you happy? Do we need a lot more? I'm going to disappear for a sec and get a heavy metal shirt that I meant to bring, and I'll hold that up to show people they can get. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you. Very happy with the way things seem to have progressed over the last few weeks. Obviously, there was and again, it's been said on here a number of times, there was the concern, wasn't it, that June the 30th would see the sale of Murillo, possibly Gibbs White. I always thought Gibbs White would stay, but I think Murillo was the big danger, that he was going to go on the cheap, and we were going to get a big club just come in and have to accept a paltry offer. But obviously that's not happened. I think, as I mentioned to Matt when he comes back on a private message, the Niakate deal, fantastic business, but it has an air of, if it seems to be too good to be true, it probably is sort of feeling about it, i.e. that there's probably some reciprocal business that's going to be done somewhere along the line, whether that's Jake O'Brien in the near future or somebody else at some other point. It feels like there's definitely more to run on that one. As far as Anderson goes, really excited by him. I think he looks, and just reading, I think, some of the scouting comments that you put out a couple of weeks ago or a week or so ago when we signed him. I think it's Alan Carr's dad, wasn't it? He was talking about him, having an air of Gaza and Beardsley about him, and you look at, there's obviously some, again, we all fall into the trap of watching YouTube videos. I think most of his sort of highlights are from when he was at Bristol Rovers, but looks a cracking player. I remember when he came on and scored that header that was disallowed against us, not season gone, but the season before, and looked like a real player. So really excited to see where he might fit in. And I think goalkeeper wise, I just echo what Pete said. I think we've obviously got a fairly solid basis on which for Miguel to join, and I guess we'll see what happens in pre-season if he I'm sure he'll be given an opportunity in some of the pre-season games we've got coming up to show what he's got, and then it's down to Nuno, who hopefully, as a former keeper himself, will be a sound judge as to which way to go when the actual season starts. So yeah, all in all, pretty happy. We're interested to see what happens with Murillo. Again, coming back to his comments the other day, I know you talked about this already, but I don't have too much frustration or anger about what he said. I think a lot of it depends on the question he was asked. If he sat there in an interview and someone said to him, if you could play for any Premier League club, which one would it be? I think if you ask, probably 80% of all footballers who play in the Premier League that don't play in the top 5 or 6 teams, Man City would probably be your answer, wouldn't it? So I don't sort of, I don't have too much issue with those comments. I'm sure if he stays, then he'll be determined to do just as well as he did last year, to make sure that when that time comes, probably at some point in the next 12 months, where he does get a move just as good as it can be. So again, win-win situation with him. If he does, if we do end up selling him, it'll be on our terms, and then we can reinvest that in the squad. So yeah, all in all, I think we've done fantastic business, and yeah, look forward to seeing what the next month or so may hold before the season starts.
Yeah, Murillo was everyone reported back yesterday, and Murillo was there and looked perfectly happy. I don't think he's going to agitate for a move or anything. I mean, I've asked every other contributor, Pete. So, are you narked by him naming teams, or is it a bit of naivety, or as Paul said there, you get asked that kind of question. Some people answer it a bit more diplomatically, but he's a 22-year-old kid speaking in Brazil, in his homeland, and we shouldn't read so much into it. What do you think?
I think you sort of answered the question there, to be honest. I'm not knocked about it at all. I mean, I think in an ideal world, it probably isn't the most sensible thing to be listing clubs that you'd like to move to and talking about the club being a stepping stone to whatever. But, I mean, like you say, this is an interview in a foreign country in a different language, and we've got access to no context whatsoever. So personally, I wouldn't judge him whatsoever for it. If we're going to judge Murillo, I think we'll judge him from his actions on the pitch, and he's been pretty extraordinary for us. And it's also worth saying that, generally speaking, this it's not a sort of charitable situation. Footballers are part of what is basically a business. They're not clubs aren't doing a favour for them. Forest have signed Murillo because they think he's someone that they can get relatively cheap, who can do well for us, and then we can sell for an awful lot of money. That's essentially what's going on. While that's happening, let's just enjoy it. So, if we get any more time with Murillo playing in our football team, it'll be absolutely fantastic. And I think we should say for every minute of it, I still suspect there's a good chance he'll be sold, because he's clearly a very significant asset, and that's sort of the nature of the business these days. Plus, you can't really hold it against him for wanting to play at the highest level possible for as long as possible. So I think if had it been a sort of live interview that I'd seen in English, then maybe I'd be slightly more critical about his use of words or whatever. But he's a young lad. We've got no context, and I mean, generally speaking, I don't think we should really be too worried about it anyway. It's just as an old manager would say, it is what it is.
I mean, I saw a listener in the comments yesterday who speaks Portuguese, who lives in Portugal, saying, the translation's accurate, the context is there. And I do agree with that. But, if you're being interviewed by, say, Colin Frey on Radio Nottingham, you're not going to say, I want to sign for Man City. So there's certain things around it. And like Kelvin said yesterday, every player in the dressing room talks about transfers. They probably all love to sign for Man City, if we're honest, but they just don't come out and say it. So it doesn't affect how I view the player. I wouldn't say sell him now because he wants to play for Man City, because, like I say, they all want to play for Man City deep down. As long as he's putting a shift in on the pitch and playing with the same commitment and, quality we saw last season, then I'm all for it. And I still think he'll go like Pete because he's a valuable commodity. But if he is here, then I think he'll put a shift in still, like he did last season. If anything, I thought he put too much of a shift in when he should have come off injured a couple of times. Man City obviously springs to mind when he got rinsed by Haaland. But no problems with me. I feel like we discussed it a lot, but just interesting to get people's takes on it. Right, here's the heavy metal football shirt. Try and hold it to the camera. That's the latest one around the City ground. There you go. So yeah, that's the kind of thing you can get. It's really good. I've got the Garibaldi one myself, the 93-95 away shirt. So yeah, fully vouch for them. There was a question as well, just quickly. I think we're probably asking the wrong audience here, unless either of you chaps are really into kits. I'm not massively, but Cassandra asks around the new training kits, and Dominguez's hair caught my attention. Absolutely wondrous hair for the new season. Do you like them, Paul? Are you bothered or not? Are you a kit person?
Not massively. I mean, I'd be interested. Not so much the training kits. I think I was quite interested to see what the actual playing kit looks like. Although I suspect it's not going to be, hugely different. There's not that much you can do with a red shirt and white shorts that's dramatically sort of controversial, is there? So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I think, like you said, Dominguez's hair was the big takeaway for me as to what he'd done with it, and whether we see that at the start of the season, if indeed he's still here. I guess he's another one that's a bit of a question mark around, isn't there? Whether he'll still be with us. But no, I'm not too invested in what the training kit looks like. But for those that are, if they like it, then all well and good. I guess it's all good revenue for the club at the end of the day, isn't it?
Exactly, increasing revenue, the cost of them. That's one of the reasons I don't buy them. I guess the new kit will be announced soon. I imagine it's partly because they probably need players to be around to film the promotional material. I know we're a bit behind some other clubs in that, but I imagine some of them have been roped in for shoots and suitably youth appealing music to be put over the top of it for social media, Pete.
You sound so old.
I am so old. I make no apology that I'm not like I've got loads of Forest kits, but I think the most recent one is probably Billy Davis years. Yeah. Any take from you on kits before we wrap up, Pete?
I can't say I'm massively concerned. I won't be buying any of the training kits. I did see a picture of them. I thought that instinctively felt a lot of white on there for me, but I'm not too bothered. There was a nice I saw there's a very smart looking sort of green training kit that looked quite sharp, but I'm certainly not really a fashion expert or anything, so I'll probably hold my judgment any further than that.
No, I can't buy. I mean, one of the reasons I don't buy it is I don't live in Nottingham. I live on the edge of Leicester, so I can't go into Leicester wearing a Forest kit because, from experience, you get a bit of abuse if you do that. So yeah, that's my reason for it. Right, as Steve says, do hit like, and that is Steve McQueen, not the Steve McQueen, but that is the accurate name as we confirmed on a previous episode. So yes, thank you very much for that, Steve, and do us a favor if you haven't already, you can consider subscribing. That would make a big difference if you hit subscribe on this and on iTunes and Spotify. Leave us a lovely review. There was a couple I read the other day. Very kind of you, and you can become a channel member as well and come along to our social on August the 1st if you do. Right, any other business, any final comments, Paul Morley?
Just to say, obviously, cricket season, as you mentioned, I'm into cricket, which I am. So I'm going to the test match tomorrow at Lords, which I'm looking forward to. I think I might have mentioned this on when I was on the members stream only, but for anybody who's out there interested in cricket, there's a really good online cricket community that you can get involved with. It's you can find it at www.worldsbestcricketclub. worldsbestcc.com. Sorry, that's it. worldsbestcc.com. And there's membership you can join. I think it's a couple of quid a month, a bit like membership to this. Gets access to interviews and chance to ask questions to test match players, county players, that kind of thing. So if anyone's into cricket, give that a look.
Wonderful. Pete, anything from you before we go?
No, nothing from me apart from just extreme jealousy at Paul revealing that he's going to be at the test match. I'm going to be watching at home, probably drowning in a pool of my own tears as we're sending Jimmy Anderson off. I think probably the greatest English sportsman of my lifetime. And I must say I'm sort of already feeling a bit of a sense of grief about his departure from the international stage. So it's going to be an emotional watch, I think.
It's mad. He was born the day before me, Jimmy Anderson. So for him to still be going now, I can barely. I stretched out to write the notes this on the bed, and then I got off, and like my ankles were hurting. I'm so old. Pete saying I'm so old. Jimmy Anderson wouldn't be feeling like that. He'd be ready to bowl 30 overs in a day. So yeah,
Jimmy's still wearing that England badge with pride all across the world, and you can't even wear your Forest badge on the outskirts of Leicester.
I can wear on the outskirts of Leicester. I wear stuff around here in the village, but I'm not going into the city centre and getting white van man winding. This is what happens: winding the window down and just hurling abuse at me. So yeah, outskirts of Leicester, all good. I did have something. Oh yeah, this is from a listener called Andrew Clifford. Excuse me. Diagnosed with epilepsy a couple of years ago. After my diagnosis, I had a really hard time, both mentally and physically. Didn't know what any of it meant, and an overwhelming fear of what if whenever I was alone or wanting to do anything. So one particular area of struggle was with his family. Had a young son who was 8 at the time, witnessed him having a seizure and didn't know how to help his son deal with it. There's a charity called Epilepsy Action who help with stuff like that, with a Just for Kids section on how to help deal with what is a pretty challenging issue, I imagine. So Andy is doing the 3 Peaks Challenge later this month. I'll drop the link in the description or the comments. But if you want to send a couple of quid Andy's way to help Epilepsy Action, I'm sure he'd very much appreciate that. Oh yeah, I knew I was going to ask. You said about the greatest English sportsman. I saw a thing saying Andy Murray is the greatest British sportsman of all time. So if I threw those two at you, I'll do the same to Paul. Pete, who is the greatest British sportsman of all time, do you think?
Of all time?
If you can think, this is putting you right
Can
on
I
the
just
spot.
I feel like I should just do my lifetime. I hate it when we have these chats about, I heard a big chat on a podcast the other day about whether Jordan Pickford's the best England keeper of all time or something. And it's absolutely, putting aside that actual issue, it's just absolutely mad for people like me to be talking about Gordon Banks. I mean, I've literally never seen him play, apart from very, very small clips. I mean, Andy Murray has been incredible. And I guess what goes in his favour is that I think tennis players at the very peak get a bit more attention than cricket players at their peak, because when they win Grand Slams or whatever it is, it's like monumental, isn't it? And what Murray did, actually breaking through against some of them, I presume the greatest male tennis players of all time, seems pretty extraordinary to me. But for me, it's all about Jimmy. I can't see past what he's achieved and the insane longevity of it, and the fact that, I mean, I haven't got the stats to hand, but as a man in his mid to late 30s, he's been bowling better than ever at the absolute peak of his game, just challenging the very best in the sport across the world, seemingly endlessly. And I can't get over it, and I don't want him to leave. Don't go, Jimmy.
A few names have come up in the comments that might help Paul out here if he's had time to think about it. Oliver says Harry Arter, obviously for his longevity in the Premier League, but a few others. I know Daley Thompson, Gary Lineker, Mark Cavendish, who just broke the Tour de France stage win record, Lewis Hamilton, Steve Redgrave. Derek's not a fan of Andy Murray. I like Andy Murray. I think he's actually quite funny.
He's a great guy.
seems a nice guy. And Steve Battlemuch, City Councillor Steve Battlemuch, who's been involved in the whole Forest chat, says Ian Botham.
Nice to see Steve overcoming his political tendencies to vote for Botham as well. Though that's a fair effort.
Yes, that's true. Crossing party lines for it's a bit of a Tory in Ian Botham there. Oh, Rob says Ronnie Sullivan as well. That's quite a good shout as well. I would go for an individual sportsman like Murray because of the mental strength it takes to just keep picking yourself up when you haven't got teammates around you. Obviously, you've got a coach and a support team, but you're out there on your own, basically. What about you, Paul?
Yeah, I think I know Murray's a bit of a Marmite character. I like him as well. Always have done. I think it's difficult to look beyond it. I say in the sphere of individual sport, difficult to look beyond Murray, really. And Sullivan's a good shout. I guess it's a question of and is snooker a sport? Yes, it is. Of course, it is. But in terms of physical demands that high level tennis puts on your body, I mean, I know he's had a few creaks and metal hips and things like that inserted over the course of time, but to come back from some of that stuff that he's had to come back from, I think hats off to Murray. I think Jimmy, for longevity, like you say, Pete, has been incredible. I mean, I remember I was on the Ashes tour of 2002-03 with the Barmy Army when he played a few one-dayers at the end of that tour when he first came into the team before he played his first Test match later on that summer. So I've seen him from the start to the end. It's going to be emotional being there tomorrow at the end, although it won't necessarily be the last day he takes the field, but it's going to be an emotional one. I did actually look last night. I was showing my son who's coming along with me tomorrow about Jimmy and the number of wickets he's taken and stuff. And so I think he's taken about 1,200 first-class wickets. Again, without going down a rabbit hole of cricket stats, chap called Wilfred Rhodes played at the top level for 30 odd years, took 4,400 wickets back in the at the turn of the last century. So, and again, I guess the fitness demands were somewhat different back then. But for someone to be able to to do that is I guess we would never seen it, and it will be pictures like you see W.G. Grace with a big bushy beard. I'm sure that, but for someone to be able to do that is. Obviously gets lost in today's kind of modern comparison world that we live in. But I mean, there's so many great British sportsmen, isn't there? I mean, obviously Lewis Hamilton probably deserves a nod for what he did at the weekend, for being again at the top level of that sport for probably 17, 18 years that he's been there now. Difficult one to choose, but I think everybody that's been mentioned in the comments is a worthy note, particularly Jet from Gladiators.
I haven't seen
that was definitely one of my favourites back in the early nights.
That's so Partridge. I love it.
There's a few more I was going to say about W.G. Grace. We're going down a rabbit hole on a tangent here. There's just so many funny stories about him just refusing to be out, and I'd love to see what his actual stats would have been if he'd admitted that the ball had hit the stumps a few times more. Nick says about Hamilton as well. Greg Oram says the Brownlee brothers. Chris Kearney says Phil Taylor, which is a fair shout given how dominant he was in darts. I'm trying to find. I should have guessed who would have said that. Jet from Gladiators from Danscape. I think that's about it. A few people saying Eddie the Eagle as well. Right. I think that just about finishes matters for today. We shall be back on Thursday, I think, next with a Q&A. So I'll prime people for questions on that. And that might be it for the week, unless I do something on tomorrow, because winding down for a week or so after that. Right, I thought this would take about 30 minutes or so, and we've ended up talking for 55, probably about 10 of it about nothing to do with Forest at all, about Phil Taylor and Jet from Gladiators. Pete Blackburn, thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Certainly was. Thanks for joining me. Paul, thanks for joining us as well.
Yeah, thanks for asking. Love to see you both again, and great to be involved.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Enjoy the test match. I'm sure you will. Did you say your son's going as well?
Yes, yeah. So hopefully we get back. We should have a look at the train. We should get back about 10 minutes before the England match kicks off if everything goes to plan. So fingers crossed.
I don't think you'll miss too much in the first 10 minutes, or we'll score and go 1-0 up and completely shut up shop. But if it works, then that is all fine in tournament football at this stage. Right. Thanks very much, everyone. Good to have 200 plus people with us today. Have a good day. And if we don't see you tomorrow, then we shall see you soon.